Hello and welcome back to the Soul Pathway podcast. I am Andy Brine, and today within this podcast, we are going to be speaking about men, masculinity, and honoring your emotion. We look at the world today, and a lot of people are speaking about toxic masculinity. So today we're going to be touching on that a little bit, but more importantly, we're going to be talking about the healthy masculine and how we can operate in beautiful ways so that we can have that balance within ourselves and you know live from a place of that happiness, contentment, and fulfillment. Today I have Chris Roberts here again. He was been on the show before, and we're going to have a conversation around this to hopefully support men in society today. So welcome, Chris. Tell us a bit more about yourself again, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. Thank you very much for having me on again. It was a pleasure and a joy last time. Yeah, I really appreciate you having me back. I run an institute called Inner Frontier Institute, which is focused on giving people on a spiritual path the tools to for their healing, for manifesting through the lens of energy work primarily. So very specific pragmatic tools to tapping into your, people are familiar with chakras and auras and all this stuff, but most of the time there's not a lot of information out there of how to actually tap into these things. So that's what I'm doing. And I had my healing journey and just trying to help other people along the way with things that had worked for me, because I had tried a lot of things and nothing really stuck like this methodology that I teach. Um,
Fantastic. And we actually had a great conversation about that in the first interview. So if you wanted to find out more about, Chris and his work with regards to energy, be sure to check out the previous interview as well, because we had a great conversation there.
I think it's really relevant too to even this topic because, a little bit about my background on the subject. I mean, I was raised by a single mother. My father died when I was really young, and I didn't have any male role models. So I kind of grew up in this space of not. Um, my mother was dating a woman for a long time, and so I had a lot of insecurities about masculinity, and it really took me a long time to kind of find my own connect with my own masculinity. And I don't think that's too uncommon these days. I think it's an important subject.
Definitely. And one of the reasons why I wanted to touch on it, within this podcast and more importantly, within this interview today, was I've personally found that when we go through an awakening and more so as we step into the age of Aquarius, the energies have shifted quite significantly, and not in terms of the turbulent energy and what's happening in the world, but more so with relation to the feminine energy rising. And as the feminine energy is rising, it can be called it can cause men to lose track of their own masculinity in essence. So I think, as we touch on this subject, it's really finding out how can we really connect with ourselves as men and live in that place of strength and courage, but also really connect with our emotions, which we'll touch on again today as well.
Yeah, I agree. Fully agree with all of that. It's an interesting time, and um, old ways of old patterns and old ways of being are clearly um, being forced to evolve, I think, collectively and individually.
So
You
tell,
know,
tell me a bit more about some of your struggles then, growing up with a single mum, and obviously you'd had a lot of feminine energy around you as you were growing up. What were some of the challenges you were facing in terms of connecting with that healthy masculine within you?
sure. I think from one perspective, I feel like that I was, being raised by a single mother must be tough. And, you know, no one's perfect. I have an amazing mother who, luckily, at this point, I have a much better relationship with. I was not an easy one to raise. I went through some trauma early on and became very afflicted before I was even 10. So, I put her through a lot of hell, but I think in that process, as a single mother, she, was trying to raise a son, with the information that she has of being a woman, and not really fully realizing that the information that she has on certain things isn't really going to be applicable to me living my life in a male body. And so I think that there was some kind of conflict, a lot of this being unconscious, of course, both on my part and hers. And so a lot of this is in hindsight, of course, but you know, and me, I think part of that conflict is me rejecting that at a certain level, and being resentful. And it wasn't, again, until after the fact that I've kind of had to go back and look back and realize, like, okay, well, my mother did the best she could, and actually objectively did pretty damn good, right? And it's not her fault that I've had to, I have my own, we all have our own journeys anyways, and through my own journey had to kind of discover what it means to be a man, and connect with my masculinity in a way that is healthy. And so, yeah, it's a journey, it's a process. I mean, I think anyone who has the value of wanting to be aligned with truth and wanting to be aligned with their growth will find their way. If you just have that intention and that spark and that curiosity, even if it's a dark path, and there's confusion, I think that there's resources out there, to be able to find your way through that.
Definitely, definitely. I think there's always resources we can lean upon. And one thing I'd like this podcast for me to be a resource for people to connect with their own spirituality and awaken to who they are, so they can love, honor, and appreciate themselves. So,
Yeah.
with regards to masculinity in mind, what would you say is a healthy masculine energy or perspective to look at for men?
Sure. I mean, so I think that, what, first of all, I think that we all have components of masculine and feminine energy within us, both men and women. I would say a healthy expression of a masculine energy is, I think a lot of it's stereotypical of what men are into. We are tend to be more goal driven and focused. We're into things. Women tend to be more into, processes and relationships and people. And I think both those things are very important. But I think men tend to need to have a need to be able to have something they're working towards. I see a lot of people from my generation, the men that are kind of stuck by, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this is the wrong terminology, that are kind of captured by their, what would it be, animus. They're stuck at home playing video games and living a Peter Pan kind of life, right? And so I think that that's an arrested development that a healthy masculine, energy would be able to remedy, right? And finding purpose and you know reaching for something more. I mean, and it's I feel like I'm on thin ice here, because I don't really want to imply that these things don't apply to women. Um, but I think part of it's really kind of dialed into our DNA, even where men for millennia would go out and they had a very difficult task of finding some protein,
Yeah,
right? Um, and so I think there's something to be said about that as well. But yeah, I think a healthy, balanced psyche is, a man is connected to a sense of purpose, um, and has goals that they're striving over, that are developing them and fulfilling them, and not only purpose, but provide, whether they have a family or not, or providing for themselves and possibly even a family. I mean, I think that there's something deeper in that for us.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, a purpose-driven man is someone that is living from, that sense of pride within themselves as well, and that holds a beautiful energy. But what I find has been interesting, if we look over the past 30 years, 30, 40 years, our society has been very much dominant by that masculine energy anyway. So we look at men and women, and men are women when men and women are being driven by this masculine energy to strive and get to where they want, to have the life of their dreams, so to speak. And in many ways, what I find is, with regards to connecting with self, I find that is in many ways disconnecting us from self at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of different things at play, and society's getting shaken up, and you talk about Age of Aquarius. Yeah, there's a lot of different modes of being that are um, crumbling and making room for an evolution. I mean, certainly, it's time to evolve past a male-dominated society. I know you'd mentioned toxic masculinity, and certainly, I think part of a remedy to that is, being able to honor not only the divine feminine, but inside ourselves and others, but allowing that to elevate and expect more out of men, to find that healthy expression of, toxic masculinity, sure, but what's the other end of that pole? There's also a healthy expression of that, of course, right? Um, just like I think that there's probably an unhealthy expression of femininity as well as a healthy expression of femininity, right? So
Yeah,
I think that we're just, we're going through growing pains as a species, as a culture, as a society, and there's a lot of conflict and volatility in that growth, especially when we've dominated the planet and we're killing our environment. I think that we need to evolve, and addressing things like out of control masculinity, which makes me kind of think of this mentality of endless perpetual growth at the expense of all things. Like that's toxic masculinity, if you ask me,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I
We need
agree.
to temper that with the divine feminine, so we don't you know completely deplete the planet for the sake of profits. I mean, I think that that's a product of a toxic. If you look at the energy,
Yeah,
that's a masculine issue. Like, we need to temper that with some nurturement and some temperance, to care for our environment and our people. So
yeah,
I'm not
I
sure
agree.
if I answered your question. I might have sidestepped it, but I think it's all in there. I mean, we're evolving, and I think it's a very exciting time for our evolution, although also scary.
Yeah, no, and I actually really appreciate all you've said there, because there are aspects of toxic masculinity there, but I think there is toxic masculinity is a minefield, and in many ways, I wanted to touch on it in a way that we can see it for what it is, and honor the truth of the wounds of the masculine in terms of the energy, because we look at the world today as well, and I don't want to go into any form of politics or anything like that, but I feel in some ways cancel culture is also a byproduct of toxic masculinity, because in many ways what we have to do, and my personal opinion and belief, is that we have to honor our wounds, honor where they come from, and really connect with the pain of where they reside, and then work through them, but not just cancel them out. We need to see things for what they are, so that we can work through them, and really honor the beauty of who we are as men and even as women.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that that is certainly a remedy, and I think in a certain way, saying the same thing, where that wounded male, that wounded masculine energy. is healed, in at least in part, to a greater degree, by a balancing of that feminine energy, right? With that nurturing energy, that wounded man's inner child just really ultimately just is looking to be getting a hug, or be heard and be understood. And so the toxic side of masculinity is in the societal programming. I mean, certainly in my country, and I think this is probably the case for all Western nations, is for the longest time we're supposed to just shut up and stuff it down and man up and ignore these wounds, and clearly that's not working.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's what I wanted to speak about with regards to honoring our emotions as well. Because I know you've had a challenging journey at times. Spoken about that before, and maybe you could lean on that more here as well. But I've had experiences where I've really connected with my shadow and some of the wounds, and it's been painful to connect with those emotions. And if we look at the conditions of society has taught us that we are not allowed to express and honor emotions and feelings. And I feel that are many, from a societal standpoint, that is quite toxic, because when we honor our feelings and our emotions, we come from a place of strength, and that is where we connect with the beautiful power within ourselves as men as well, isn't it?
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, it's again, it just goes back to, you know, like I like the terminology you use as far as the honoring of it, right? And let's not, we have this habit of rejecting these things, but honoring it and looking at it and dealing with it so it can be healed. You know, and I think that the tide is changing. I think that as we go on, there's an evolution happening where, you know, it's more acceptable for men to express and feel their emotions. Um, and then as far as cancel culture goes, I mean, I think that's an interesting subject. I want to make sure I understood you clearly, where it sounds like you think that cancel culture is something that is actually overcorrecting and actually overstepping and making mistakes to a degree. Is that right?
Personally, that's the way I see it. I might
Yeah,
get
no,
a
I
bit
would
of
agree.
backlash for that, but that's the way I see it. Why are we cancelling out things or changing phrases and beliefs about things when they are just okay the way they are, as long as we accept people for the way they are as well. And I think that's really, for me, what the message is from my standpoint. Accept people as they are, but we don't need to change everything and cancel everything. We need to just honour things as they are in the moment, don't we? Okay?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I understand why you would get some flack for that. I mean, it's a slippery slope, and I've have it in the past. I've had a tendency to foolishly debate people on online forums and experience similar pushback. Of course, we should be critical of men in power who abuse their power and abuse women, or the Harvey Weinsteins of the world. Certainly, we need to. Well, that needs to change in our culture. But canceling people's careers because they make a mistake, you know, isn't isn't the right way either, right? So, first of all, who's never made a mistake before? But ruining people's lives. And, it really makes me think of too, like, I think obviously it's clear that feminism was a movement that was definitely needed, and clearly ties into the subject, and made great progress in our culture over the last century. But then you find expressions of it where now you have, I mean, I don't know if they're necessarily super prevalent, but when you have feminists who are the female version of the misogynists. You're man haters, and you're missing the point.
And if
The
I'm if
point
I'm
wasn't to get your rights so you can dominate men.
yeah,
You know.
and I'm so glad you mentioned that, because in many ways, I personally believe this is a trait of toxic masculinity within the feminine movement, because it's
Yeah.
coming from
Oh
the
yeah.
oppression of men. it's
Yeah.
shifting towards the oppression of men, whereby, what is this shifting of consciousness and raising of consciousness all about? It's about honoring and appreciating men and women, honoring
Right.
women for the beauty of who they are. We love you as who you are. We want you to honor that. We love you as men for who you are as well.
Right.
As long as you allow yourself to step into that. Both aspects are beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I don't know what degree that's happening within, a feminist movement. I see it from time to time. But yeah, it's just ironic, right? I'm not sure. Is that, I mean, what do you think? Is that a, it sounds like you think that that's an expression of toxic masculinity within within um, the females of the world, more so than it would be an expression of toxic femininity. I mean, I guess it is more of a would be considered a masculine dynamic to want to dominate.
Yeah.
It
I
is more of a
just I
masculine
just
trait.
feel like I speak a lot about archetypes, and when you look at the archetype of the masculine and the warrior comes from that fights to get where they want to go, but without really having the care and consideration for others. And I feel like when the toxic femininity comes into play is really where that is happening, really, from my standpoint. We need to honor each and every man and what they've gone through, as well as women. Um,
Right.
we
Yeah.
need to also respect the wounds that we've passed on as a collective as men, and maybe we can touch on that and how we can begin to heal the wounds that men have passed down the generations, so that we're not passing them on to future generations.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. I mean, now we're talking about. I mean, would it be accurate to say you're speaking of the dynamic of what would call like a male privilege, right? In the effects of a male dominant society and owning up and acknowledging a male privilege in society. I mean, is that am I interpreting that correctly?
I suppose not so much as male privilege, but more so the dominance we have had
Yeah.
over women for years. We are not trying to oppress over women.
Right.
We want women to have equal rights and equal opportunities, but at the same time, we want to also ensure that we have the same privileges.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just going to be a process. I mean, at one point in time there were matriarchal societies, but clearly our most recent past for quite some time has been very patriarchal. There's no doubt about that. um I mean, I'm curious about this too. I hear different opinions and arguments in regards to how much of a patriarchal oppressive society do we still live in. I mean, do you feel like there is a patriarchy that is still suppressing women to the point of total domination, or what's your opinion on that?
Personally, I don't feel that is the case, but I'm not speaking as a woman anyway. But I do believe that it's shifted so much over the years. We are giving women the equal rights and equal opportunities to live and be as they are, and we would love to step for them to step into who they are really. But I feel that in many ways women have really tried to step heavily into the masculine role, which in many ways has caused them to lose sight of their own inner femininity as well. And from my work with regards to spirituality, it's honoring the masculine and feminine within, and connecting with the wholeness of who you are. So that's
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I think that's, yeah. I saw, I'm probably going to butcher it, but I saw this meme that said, was it? It's something to the effect of, why are these, why are these women trying to be equal to men when they're clearly better, or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's all about just honoring, you know, our similarities, but our differences. I mean, you can't really have one without the other, right? The expression of, through a spiritual lens, even the open and the receptive, and the connected to higher energies. But you also, to live in balance, you also need the more grounded and laser focused energy of more of a masculine energy. And I think that having these things having to compete is missing the point, right? It's about balancing these things both within ourselves and with within our societies. That's going to be the highest benefit for everyone.
And
You know.
if I think about myself anyway, and who I am with regards to my energy, I'm very much connected with my own inner feminine energy, connected with my intuition, connected with my own inner emotions, and I think that's a beautiful thing. We all have the different balances of the masculine and feminine energies within us anyway,
Right.
and it's about
Right.
honoring, what that is for us again, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it really is a balancing. And just to speak for a moment from my personal experience, I think that that's something that I had to go through my own healing journey and awakening. Where again, back to being raised by a single mother, I was running way too much feminine energy for a long time, and it didn't really work for me. Right? It was it was out of balance and out of whack. And it really wasn't until I began to really dig deep and start to heal myself that I was able to balance it out and temper it out with running my own male energy. I was stuck in a rut. This, and not only was it too much feminine energy, it was too much of my mother's energy. And I really need to start running on my own information, my own vibration. But then when it gets balanced out, you get, and from my perspective, you get to keep all the benefits and all the good things of being able to be in that space and connect. Like you said, it's a beautiful thing to be able to connect to your gentler side, your compassion and your empathy, and whatnot. But if as a male in this society, if you're running too much feminine energy, you're going to get trampled, man. you know I was getting bullied all the time. I didn't have any direction. And so it was out of whack. But balancing it all, bringing in my information, my masculine energy, getting into a direction of purpose, I get to have the best of both worlds now. I get to express a healthy masculine energy and let that manifest in my life and produce good things. And I also have the benefit of being able to be connected to my compassion and my intuition, my gentle heart.
Yeah.
And who doesn't want that?
No, I think that's beautiful as well. I really do think that's the strength that comes from men that have that balance within, that have embraced their inner feminine. They've gone on that journey of awakening to connect with their own inner feminine, but also embraced that masculine. And one thing that came up within me as you were speaking about that was the fear of embracing your masculine energy, because I know, when we spoke about, the societal, perspectives of toxic masculinity, I feel that there are many men who are afraid to express their masculinity nowadays
Mhm.
for fear of
Yeah.
it coming across as toxic. And was interested to get your viewpoint from there.
Yeah, I absolutely think that that's the case. And I can't tell you how many times I've come across a woman who's just like, where the hell are all the men? You
Mm,
know, I'm dating all these men, and they're I mean, they're saying whether they're weak or feminine, they're pushovers. They don't have any spines,
mm,
right? There's wait, and so I think that again, I think that there's volatility in culture shifting so rapidly and quickly, and we're overcorrecting. I mean, I think it's really a product of overcorrecting, right? Where we've gone from, you go back to the 50s where, you know, a wife doesn't question their husband or they're going to get slapped in the face. Obviously, not a good thing. to where now men are just such pushovers, and obviously not all men, but there's an abundance of very feminized men. And so they've kind of swung back the other way. And and real quick too, I mean, that was part of my process. I went from being running too much feminine energy. Um, I was very confused why being a nice guy wasn't enough to attract a woman. But, in my process of balancing myself, I ended up going back too masculine for a little bit. I'm still balancing it out, right? So for a long time, let's call it a decade or, really more than a decade, running too much female energy and kind of being impotent to where I've kind of like broken through and I'm rebalancing into the masculine side and really connecting with my inner asshole in my own toxic masculinity and realizing, okay, I overshot it a little bit. Let's get some more of that like patience and compassion, mixed in. But yeah, I think that that's very clear that, I mean, certainly I'm from the Bay Area. You go to San Francisco, forget about it, and I don't want to come down hard on anybody, but there's a lot of guys who can't. Again, I see the expression of just being um, kind of the impotent man. There's a lot, you get the term incel and stuff like that. It's like if you were connected to your masculine energy, you'd realize that just being nice and catering to women's emotions isn't the totality of what women are wanting from men. It's just not.
It's very true, isn't it? It's very true.
Women like men. Women like a healthy uh, uh, a healthy expression of masculinity, right? They need it and want it, just like men love the feminine expression of a woman, And so I don't think again, it's about balancing, not demonizing masculinity and calling everything toxic because, things have been out of whack for so long in society. It really is the balancing act, right?
And I'm actually really pleased we've had this conversation today, because I think it's a conversation that a lot of people don't have. We speak a lot about toxic masculinity, or the collective consciousness speaks a lot about it, and it's not healthy for any one of us to have these judgments placed upon us. We need to think about how we can operate in a society from a healthy perspective, you know, and really get to the truth of what the beauty of masculinity is all about, you know, as well as the beauty of the divine feminine as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's really important that, yes, let's acknowledge, we should acknowledge the unhealthy expression of masculinity, but from a purely metaphysical and spiritual lens, we should really be focusing on what it is we want to see and create in the world. So to me, that would suggest that let's not turn a blind eye to the negative expression or the harmful damage that the negative expression of masculinity can be, or femininity for that matter. But let's really focus on what is the positive pole of this? What does positive masculinity look like? What's its utility? And let's engender that. Let's focus on what we want to create in the world and let that be the standard for which we can aim and reach to. That's how you transform the society around this topic, not just demonizing men in ways that are out of whack too, right? That's hence the cancel culture. Hence, ruining people's careers because they make a mistake. There's a difference between Harvey Weinstein and what's his name? What's the comedian? Oh geez. Either whether it's as I wasn't gonna think of it Aziz, but Aziz Ansari or Louis C.K. Louis C.K. is not a Harvey Weinstein. Did he make a mistake? It's kind of creepy and gross and weird, yeah. But I want a world where I can watch Louis C.K. be Louis C.K. You know, if he's out there, abusing and raping women, yes, he should pay for his crimes. But let's not pretend like they're the same thing.
Yeah. So if we go back to one of the first questions, how do we embody a healthy masculine energy in society? How do we raise the consciousness in a way that we can support one another and honor the beauty of the masculine as well as the feminine?
I mean, I think that you already said it, which is, instead of the old way of suppressing, the idea that men are typically just, to be a man and tough it out and suppress this pain. I think that the cure for that really is to create a culture where we can appreciate the balancing of these energies through respecting that inner femininity, and creating a space where men can feel safe and don't feel like they have to jeopardize their masculinity by acknowledging their pain and being able to cry. I mean, it was literally just this week I was hanging out with a friend of mine, and he happened to have an old friend from high school or whatever that I hadn't met before. And at one point in the conversation, we're listening to a song, and I'm like, "Oh man, this song's in this movie," and that was such a great point. Like in this scene, I mean, it made me cry my eyes out. And let me tell you, his friend, pure disgust. Like he had liked me. He had appreciated our conversation and our interaction. We're all having a good time. But the moment I admit to shedding a tear at a heartfelt moment in a movie, uh, get out of here. He couldn't handle it. He like lost all his respect. And so, I think if we can, as a society, continue to demonstrate that, hey, being able to not run from or deny what you're feeling on the inside isn't a threat to being a man. I mean, it's just such a lie, right? It's such a foolish thing. So I think that you hit the nail on the head with that. And how we go about doing that, I don't know, other than just, you know, demonstrating it and being an example for others.
Yeah, I mean, I just you look at the world around you, and you only need to realize that each and every one of us has our struggles. We all have our ups and downs on our journey, and it can definitely be challenging at times. And who's to say that men can't honor and express their emotions? I find that we create more broken men by suppressing and repressing these emotions than creating healthy masculine men that can step into their power and strength.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I mean, it's just not working. I mean, if you just look at it through a purely scientific lens, the data is there. It's not working, right? So instead of ignoring the problem and letting the repercussions of this old mode of being continue on, you know, we can make better choices. And I think that just starts on an individual level, right? I think you know as one person heals, he thus sends a ripple out to the rest of us, demonstrating and exemplifying a new way of being in the world, right? And so that's why I'm really big on people who are on a healing path, on a spiritual path, acknowledging that this isn't just about you, right? Every person who heals a wound makes it that much easier for the person behind them. And so,
Yeah,
in that sense, I think that there's a deep, deep
definitely.
connection to purpose, when you look at it that way.
And again, I'm so pleased we've had this conversation, and I hope for those of you who have been listening to this haven't found this to be too much of a rant about, you know, men and masculinity and even the toxicity within men. You know, I wanted this discussion to be about, you know, honoring the healthy aspects of the masculine, but really shedding a light on the truth about, you know, some of the negative aspects that of the masculine that are being expressed within the world right now, so that we can get to the truth of the healthy masculine and start to operate from that space.
My dog's gonna bark. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Andy. I mean, I think it's a very important, that's enough. It's a very important subject, clearly. I mean, even just want to take that one step further. I mean, even if, you know, we're able to address this on an individual level and to stop passing our wounds down to our children alone would change the face of the planet in what, a generation, 2 generations, let alone the people around us. So I think it's I think that you're correctly identified that this is a very important conversation to have and to discuss. Yeah, I think it's crucial. So, you know, thank you for doing what you do and creating the space for, you know, us to have this conversation and others alike to have this dialogue. So yeah, I appreciate you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and I want to say thank you for joining me as well. Thank you for having this conversation with me, and thank you all the listeners for tuning in as well. One final question for you though, Chris, is where can we find out more about yourself and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I run a Facebook group called Activated Empaths. I also have a free ebook. It's titled For Empaths, but anybody who's on a spiritual journey, who's looking to heal from any kind of trauma. You know, a lot of us who are really sensitive in the world tend to get overwhelmed or drained by the energies around us. I have a free ebook that kind of just outlines why that happens and what to do about it, called The Empath's Guide to Spiritual Healing. You can find that at inner-frontier.com and download that for free.
Perfect. And with that, I will say thank you again for joining me. It's been a real pleasure and privilege, and I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future on this podcast. I really enjoy these conversations. So thanks again, and thank you all for tuning in as well.
All right, Andy, thank you so much. See you next time.
Take care. Bye for now.
Bye.
It's also about the masculine coming back into balance.
I had reconciled my mind and my soul.
A world opened up that words cannot describe.
But you have to love yourself. You can only love another to the extent to which you love yourself. That simple yet profound truth.